Hi guys, in our last few videos we focused on ensuring you had the best setup for your wheel in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Getting that right is one of the most important factors in being able to feel how your car is reacting to the track. Now we're going to switch our focus over to the actual car setup and how to best adjust your setup to achieve faster lap times. This setup video is going to be completely beginner friendly. You absolutely don't need to be a master mechanic to follow along. My goal is to show you how each setup option affects your car and what you should be aiming for when tweaking these options. There'll be a lot of tips along the way which will hopefully make you more confident when adjusting your car setup in Assetto Corsa Competizione. This guide is completely usable on all versions of the game, including the Xbox and PlayStation 4 console versions, so let's jump straight into the setup menu and start this guide by looking at your tyres. So your tyre's PSI is essentially the amount of pressure in each tyre at any given point. During a dry race, you'll want the PSI to be around 27 to 28 for optimal performance, and in a wet race this increases to around 30 to 31 PSI. This should really be your first step when setting up your car, as incorrect tyre pressures can drastically alter how your car handles. You should look to start every practice session by loading up your default car setup or the aggressive car setup and driving a few laps on track. The tyres will settle to their average pressures after around 5 laps, and you can view the PSI live on your HUD as you're driving. If they're a little high or a little low, come back into the pits and adjust your tyre pressures up or down to compensate for this. Moving on to the toe, this dictates the angle of the wheels when you are looking from above. Adding toe in will point the front of the wheels towards your car, and toe out will point the front away from your car. This setting can be adjusted to tweak your car's stability and responsiveness through corners. If you increase your toe in, you'll gain a little more stability and the car won't be as responsive. A side effect of this is that your car will become a little more understeery. If you increase your toe out, your car will become more responsive, but this also leads to a little more turn-in oversteer and twitchiness through corners. Your camber setup works alongside the toe and affects the angle of your tyre when looking from the front. Negative camber will point the tops of the tyres in towards the car, while positive camber points them away from the car. If you want a little more grip, you should look to add negative camber. This will allow more of the tyre to be in contact with the road as your car goes around a corner, therefore leading to higher grip levels. Be careful not to push your camber too far inward, as this will start to cause negative effects. The more negative camber you have, the less straight line traction you'll have, and this will cause slower acceleration and longer braking zones. The caster is a tricky beast. Essentially, it is the angle of your front suspension when viewed from the side. Adjusting it will adjust the weight of your steering and the speed at which your steering self-centers itself. It is very important when it comes to drifters and oval racing, however, it is a little less important when it comes to sim racing. A lot of the feeling which caster adjustments change can be achieved directly using the force feedback settings of your racing wheel. For that reason, we rarely touch the caster option. Instead, leave it at the default setting that the preset aggressive setup has. Moving on to the electronics now, all of these settings refer to the strength of the assist along with your engine mode. Unlike a lot of other formulas, all GT3 cars use traction control and ABS. This is by design, so by all means don't go turning all of these down to 0, thinking it'll make you faster. It won't. The traction control dictates how much wheel spin is acceptable before limiting power to the wheels. The lower this is, the more your wheels will spin before the traction control steps in. Too much wheel spin is bad on many fronts. It'll make you slower coming out of corners as you feather the throttle, it'll heat your tyres quicker, and it'll wear them out quicker too. Of course, setting your traction control too high will slow you down even more, as it will limit the amount of power going to your wheels when you accelerate, and it will cause your car to bog down. Try and find a sweet spot here, where you don't notice too much wheel spin during corner exit, but the car remains easily controllable. Some cars also have an additional traction control setting called TC2. This sets how much the power is reduced by when the traction control kicks in. It's recommended to keep your TC2 setting around the same as your overall traction control setting, give or take 1. Your ABS setting controls how much your brake pressure is modulated under heavy braking. If the car senses you are braking too heavily, the ABS will kick in and reduce the overall pressure sent to the brakes. This will stop you from locking up, but it will also cause you to have longer braking distances. This is another setting which you want finely balanced. You can see when your ABS kicks in when driving, as the ABS light will flash on the HUD when it activates. Try adjusting this up and down until you get to a point where it barely flashes, yet you aren't locking any wheels. Your ECU map adjusts your car's engine mode. The slowest ECU map setting will give you the best fuel economy but lowest power, while the highest will give you the most power available and lowest fuel consumption. Let's move on to the mechanical grip setup, starting with anti-roll bars. The anti-roll bars run from one side of the car to the other and are designed to connect your left and right suspension to limit the amount of chassis roll during corners. Stiffer anti-roll bars will limit the amount of chassis roll, while softer anti-roll bars will allow your car to lean more during corners. The main effects from adjusting the anti-roll bars are to adjust the amount of understeer and oversteer your car has. Your front anti-roll bars have the most impact over your car's behaviour as you're turning into a corner, while your rear anti-roll bars affect your car on corner exit. If you're suffering from understeer on the way into a corner, you should look to soften your front anti-roll bars, and you should stiffen your front if you're getting a little turn-in oversteer. If you're getting understeer on the way out of a corner and your car is drifting out wide, you can stiffen your rear anti-roll bars. If you're getting too much oversteer on corner exit, you should look to soften your rear. The steering ratio affects the speed that your steering wheel turns the front wheels. For example, a 14:1 ratio means that you have to turn the steering wheel 14 degrees for the car's wheel to turn 1 degree. Essentially, the higher the first number, the slower your steering will be, and vice versa. The brake setup allows us to control how much braking pressure is sent to your brakes and whether more is sent to the front or rear. The brake bias adjusts how much braking pressure is sent to the front and rear brakes. For example, a brake bias of 60 to 40 means that 60% of the braking force is sent to the front and 40 to the rear. A forward brake bias means that your car will be more stable under braking, but it can cause turn-in understeer if too high. A rearward brake bias means that your car will be less stable under braking and can cause some turn-in oversteer. There is an optimum zone, so try not to go too far one way or the other, and to be honest, the default brake bias setup is genuinely great for most tracks, so only adjust it in small increments. You can adjust your brake bias on the fly during a race, and you really should try to do this. It allows you to adjust how your car behaves under braking as your fuel levels go down and your tyres degrade, giving you much more stability during long races. Moving on to the suspension part of the mechanical grip setup. This is a relatively simple part of the car to understand in terms of what everything does. However, tweaking the springs to achieve your desired result is a little trickier. Essentially, when it comes to the wheel rate, bump stop rate and bump stop range, the higher the number, the stiffer the suspension. Despite this simplicity, the springs and suspension are so important to your overall car setup, so they do require some fine tuning. Generally, as a rule of thumb, the softer your suspension, the more grip you'll have, but having a car that's too soft can be a huge disadvantage. If your suspension is too soft, your car can bounce around over bumps and you will lose overall stability. These suspension settings are completely track dependent. When racing on smoother tracks such as Paul Ricard, you should opt for a stiffer suspension setup. When you're driving bumpy tracks such as Zolder, you should soften your car setup. Your preload differential is a system that gives the ability for the wheels to spin at different speeds and rotate independently of each other. This is very useful when cornering because the outside tyres have to go further distances compared to the inner tyre. Therefore, the outside tyre will be rotating quicker to maintain contact with the track. If you're looking for a more agile car during turning and a smooth power delivery on corner exit, then you should opt for a lower preload setup, although this will result in a little mid-corner understeer. Alternatively, increasing the preload will give a more stable car on corner entry, but will cause the rear of the car to be more lively on corner exit. You should try and balance the preload differential into that sweet spot of having enough traction under acceleration and enough stability through the corner. Let's move on to the damper section of the setup. This is possibly one of the trickiest parts of the setup to fully understand. In a nutshell, the dampers control the way energy is stored and released from the car suspension while driving. The bump setup controls how quickly the suspension springs get compressed while driving over a bump. Setting a higher bump value adds more resistance to the spring, lowering the rate of compression. The rebound setup controls how quickly the suspension spring gets back into its original state. For both the bump and rebound, there is also a fast bump and fast rebound. These do the same as the bump and rebound, but they act when the spring is expanded and compressed very quickly, such as when you hit a large bump at speed. As a rule of thumb, the rebound should always be set to the same or higher than the bump setting. Moving on to the aerodynamic part of the car setup, this part of the setup controls how much overall downforce your car has. The ride height of the car changes how close the floor of the car is to the ground. Lowering this reduces the overall drag on the car, making your car faster in a straight line. It also adds downforce by minimising the large gap underneath the car. Your ride height also has an effect on the suspension setup, so any tweaks should be ideally made together. Generally, you want to set the ride height as low as it can go without the car ever dragging or hitting the track. To achieve this, we would leave the pitch with the ride height set to default and keep lowering it a touch at a time until you feel you aren't gaining any more benefit. When it comes to the rear wing and splitter, these control how much downforce you have at the front and rear of the car. You can lower the downforce and you'll get a faster top speed, but you'll have a less manoeuvrable car with less grip during cornering. Too far the other way, and you'll have too much downforce, causing you to lose a lot of time due to drag. If you have more downforce at the front of the car, your overall aero balance will be front biased. This will give you a grippy front end, but could increase oversteer. If you go the other way and have more downforce at the rear, you will decrease the amount of oversteer that you feel, but you'll get more understeer. More rear downforce also increases your overall drag, slowing you down along the straights. The last setup option in the Aero tab is the brake ducts. These determine how much airflow gets into the air ducts both front and rear to keep the brakes cool. A low brake duct setup will keep the brakes hot for a longer period of time after your last braking zone, while a higher setup will cool them down faster. Ideally, you want your brake image on your HUD to be consistently green. After you've finished braking heavily into a corner, they can go up to a yellow colour, but should never turn red. In a similar fashion to your tyre pressures and ride height, you should do a few laps to get a consistent temperature readout and then judge whether you need to cool your brakes more or less. In the rain, you can always lower the brake duct setting a little, as the water from the track will help to cool the brakes. And that completes our Assetto Corsa Competizione beginner's setup guide. Hopefully, it will help you understand all of the different parts that go into your overall car setup and allow you to start tweaking and creating your own setups. As always, if you found this video at all helpful, please give us a like and subscribe for more sim racing content. Until next time peeps,